Hi, I'm Denise, and I'm currently playing Paulette in Legally Blonde in the West End. And believe it or not, this is my dressing room. Look at this. Look, just a wall. It's tiny. And do you know why? Because all the gays got the good dressing rooms. Yes, that was it. First dibs on all the best dressing rooms. So I spend quite a lot of my time in the gays' dressing rooms just for a little bit of luxury in my life. I think this is a fantastic campaign, and if you are at home and you feel like you have nobody to talk to, nobody to turn to, then you must know that it does get better.
I'm Stephen.
Paul.
Viv.
Russell. Jordan. Buckley. The dog.
Danny.
Stuart.
Kerry.
Nigel.
Martin.
Nick.
Giles.
Stephen.
Robbie. Chris. John. Nick.
Verity.
Tom.
Julie.
Murray. Hugo.
Graham.
Ruthie.
William.
Jamie. Andrew.
Cecilia.
James.
Malcolm.
Benoit, also known as Vanity.
I was bullied in junior high school, that's in America. And the guy who bullied me ended up in the electric chair. I ended up on Broadway.
Oh.
I didn't know where I was going, I didn't know who I was, and I was called gay before I even knew what gay was. All of a sudden, it made me question myself before I even had time to know who I was.
I knew I was different, and I kind of didn't have anyone to speak to. I didn't know who you could speak to or talk to at the time.
I knew I was gay before I really knew the vocabulary to express it.
I didn't have the same sort of crushes on male celebrities that all my friends had, and I couldn't really say that actually, you know, I was far more interested in Scully and the X-Files than Mulder.
Throughout the years and throughout maturity, it got harder because I was suppressing it more and more and more.
I had, I suppose, what you might call an affair with my best friend while I was at school. I can remember being very excited by it, but I was also terrified that anybody would get to know. I told nobody.
You can only hide your own feelings or deny your own feelings for so long.
I felt like I was stifling my spirit all the time. I was constantly sort of suppressing who I really was for fear of being judged as camp.
You feel a sense that in some way needs to be concealed or in some way needs to be not talked about.
The repercussions of that were that I constantly felt like Mr. Cellophane, or that I felt dull.
In drama classes, I refused to take part. I used to sit at the back of the auditorium and refuse to take part at all in anything that involved me having any form of personality.
A lot of people like to attack people who are more colourful than maybe they are.
I didn't have one bully, I had basically a town full of bullies.
I was so scared about walking to school. If my mum could give me a lift, you know, that was brilliant. So I used to, she'd only do that if I was late, so I used to try and like be late.
I literally couldn't leave the house without having something shouted at me.
The occasional drive-by faggot!
I didn't really tell anyone when I got to school because it's humiliating enough.
Being asked if I had a girlfriend, my mum would always dive straight in and go, he hasn't got time for that.
I certainly remember quite vividly walking down the corridors when I was at school. They go, oh, backs against the wall, and they'd all back up against the wall.
He was a very smart kind of Jackman lad.
He said, you're probably going to end up, you'll be like one of Madonna's dancers, you'll die of AIDS.
How can you justify being bullied on that level? So the only conclusion you come to is, it must be me.
A group of boys also realised I was gay, and they started following me around, very closely behind me, chanting things behind my back, just so loud enough so that I could hear them, so that I could feel threatened, to the point where I used to consider suicide. And no one in those days had proper guns, but I knew someone who had an air pistol, and I was wondering quite a lot, you know, the best way to use it.
When I was at school, I didn't believe that anybody else was gay, really. Probably I was on my own, that I would never find love, that I would always be lonely. That if anybody knew that I would be despised. And none of that is true. None of it is true. The great thing about life is to love and be loved, isn't it? And I guarantee you will be loved, people will love you. And all this stuff that goes on now when you're at school, these arseholes that kick the shit out of you, or despise you, or make your life hell, they'll soon be history, complete history, and you will have a better life.
I did get bullied at school, and by a lot of people actually, but pretty much everybody really, because I think I was on the bottom of the heap. But one of them later, about 10 years later, I bumped into in the gay bar. And he wasn't just there for the music.
At my school,
in retrospect, there was about 20 gay people there at the time. We just didn't know we were there.
My bully had a real hatred towards me, which didn't seem to be based on anything. At the end of my time at school, I found out that his mum had walked out on his dad, that she was now living with her lesbian lover. So my bully was now living with two mums and wasn't very happy about this. So it was quite easy to work out what his issue with me was.
People used to say to me, oh, it's because they don't understand, they're scared of you, and it was no comfort to me at the time. But it's actually true. It's completely true. It's always prejudice is always born from fear.
The guy who bullied me eventually murdered his girlfriend many years later and was sent to the electric chair. I noticed that this guy, Joseph Ernest, brought in the homeroom a photo album, and he brought it in every day and nobody looked at it. I went up to him and I said, gee, what's in your photo album? And he opened it and there were photographs of baseball players, and he went through page by page, and from that moment on he protected me and saved me from the other bullies, and I was never bullied again. If one of the teachers had said, what's in your photo album, maybe he wouldn't have ended up murdering his girlfriend. He was just looking for attention. He was bringing the photo album in as a cry for help, and he didn't receive any. Which basically means that the people who bully you are in much worse shape than you are.
I was in Wicked, playing an outcast of a young teenager growing up to be a young woman and being different, but being ostracised for it. I had a great deal of support and a lot of letters. It was an incredible 2 years of listening to people's everyday lives until you hear their story. You don't actually realise how traumatised some people have been, how much people have had to struggle.
The day I went to university, my mum burst into tears on the doorstep in front of my entire family and just said, promise me you won't come back gay, which was like the most horrific thing ever to say to somebody. I ended up getting together with a girl who I was with for about 4 years, and I don't know, I guess it was partly to just appease my parents and sort of a fear of being found out.
I had a lot of emotional insecurity, and I thought at 19, before I really developed into a man, that I would look just amazing, and how wonderful it would be to live as vanity. And I thought about it, and I even went as far as going to the doctors and getting a few hormone injections, but I kind of realised very quickly that that's not what I wanted to do. That was the easy way out. If I had become a woman, if I had become vanity, then I would never address those problems, and I would never allow myself to find out who I was and to allow myself to heal those wounds.
I can't imagine my life if I hadn't just become myself and let myself become who I am.
The only time I really came alive was when I was singing.
That really helped me through some other hard stuff that I might have been going through as a teenager.
Not really having any friends was a bonus, because I used to spend all my lunch times and break times in a practice room in the music block.
I knew it was the way I was going to get out of the small town and out of high school. I always knew that there was a big world out there full of possibilities.
Arriving at drama school on that first day, I thought this is the beginning of the rest of my life. Before then, I sometimes thought it might have been the end.
I joined an amateur musical theatre company. You felt like you belonged. Everyone was accepted for who they were. Everyone got on. I remember laughing so much that you couldn't even breathe. And that changed my life completely.
I then slowly started to understand who I was and what made me feel right and what made me feel whole and what made me feel happy. And I understood that I didn't have to be a certain type. I could just be me.
I went to a gay youth group in Dublin for the first time when I was 18. I met my first boyfriend, and it was incredible. We would go for coffees, and we would just go to the movies and just be normal. And I'd gone so much of my life feeling abnormal.
I eventually confided in a friend when I was about 15, and she really built my confidence up and gave me a lot of strength to eventually tell my mum and my brother.
It was a weight lifted off my shoulders, but it was a weight that I didn't necessarily have to keep carrying around all with me. My friends understood as soon as I said. I was 18 years old, and I sat them all down in a circle, And I remember just shaking, and my mother saying to me, okay, what's going on? What's wrong with you? Are you in trouble? Are you got a girl pregnant? And I went, I think I'm a homosexual.
They had a big party for me on my 21st birthday, and I talked to my mum in the day, and she was amazing, really cool, and she said that she'd always known, and I said that I wish she had told me, because that would have made it a little bit easier.
I wanted to tell my mum that I was gay, and she freaked out. She used to come into my room telling me to reconsider. You are not to tell your father. And I didn't. And then I went away to dance school, and I got a boyfriend, and she was like, okay, so I guess we're gonna have to tell your father. And it was the open day of first year at dance school. And she had told my dad, and I had to do my whole ballet demonstration, jazz demonstration, singing with him in the audience, and I was shit scared. Afterwards, he came up to me, he hugged me so tight, and I will always remember this. He said to me, I'm looking forward to meeting Stuart.
My dad's a vicar, and it's not legal in the Church of England to have a civil partnership in church. If he did that, he would lose his job. And he said to me once that if I wanted to be blessed in church, if I had a civil partnership, it would be the last thing he'd do for the Church of England, which is probably the most moving thing somebody can say to you, I think, to accept who you are.
The bubble that I was living in wasn't reality. There are other people beyond that I wasn't interacting with. There was people that share my hopes and, not share my hopes, well yeah, share my hopes, but people that share my interests and like the same things that I like that I never really encountered before I moved away. You don't always have to move away. You can do great things where you're from, but sometimes it's just harder to get perspective there.
It's an indispensable part of humanity that I'm a gay person. And to be able to say that is a really big deal, because I could not have said those words when I was 15.
When I was a gay kid at home and locked in his room, imagining what life might be like when it begins, I wouldn't have believed it. And I stood on a chair once with a noose round my neck, and I was about to do it, and I was about to end the whole thing because I thought that was the only option left to me. It wasn't that I was choosing to do it, it wasn't that I wanted to do it, it's that I thought that was the only thing I could do. I just took it a day at a time, just one day at a time, get through that one, start to move on, try and make things happen. And they do. That's the only thing that we can be sure of. Things happen.
I've given myself permission to see the way I want my life to be. I deserve this, this, and this. I was stuck at the age of 15, painfully trying to tear myself out of the chrysalis like a butterfly, but I've had a look at the wings. They're very colourful, and I'm doing very well, thank you very much.
Earlier this year, I was knighted, and I went to Buckingham Palace, and they happily asked me to kneel on a little stool and put a sword on my shoulder, and they know I'm gay, and they don't care.
Been with my girlfriend now for 5 years, and I get to go home to her in our little cosy one-bedroom flat every night, and I get to go home and shout at her because she hasn't done the washing up, and sit on the sofa and cozy up and watch TV. It's everything that I thought you couldn't have being a gay person.
I've gone on to work in musical theatre professionally as a dresser, 26 years plus, and they've been the happiest years of my life.
We met
at a friend's
birthday party, and we didn't spend a single day apart from that evening onwards. And,
No, basically.
And we basically moved in about 6 months later, and now we've got a house together, and we're getting married in April. So
I'm playing Velma Kelly in Chicago, which is a show that I always wanted to be in ever since I was a little girl.
I don't even think about being gay on a daily basis. It was something that was so all-encompassing for such a long time, and now it's just one fact.
It gets better.
I'm Irish.
It gets better.
I'm tall.
It gets better.
I'm gay.
It gets better.
At some point in your life, it won't be an issue anymore.
It gets
better.
Trust me, it does get better.
It gets better.
It will get better. It really will.
I promise you it gets better.
It does get better.
It gets better. It really does get better.
It gets better.
It gets better. It gets better. It does get massively better.